Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chief Justice Kimberly Budd, and on behalf of the Supreme Judicial Court, I'd like to welcome you to this ceremony honoring our late colleague, Chief Justice Ralph D. Gants. I'd especially like to welcome Chief Justice Gants's family, including his wife, Professor Deborah Ramirez, their son, Michael, there he is, the Chief's brother, Fred, to you and to all those attending in person and online, including the Chief's daughter, Rachel. Thank you for joining us today. This afternoon, we will be unveiling a portrait of Chief Justice Gants that will be displayed here in the John Adams Courthouse to commemorate his distinguished service to this court and to the Commonwealth. But equally important, this event gives us an occasion to recall the qualities of heart and mind that made Chief Justice Gants a great leader, jurist, colleague, and friend, and to recognize the legacy that he left us. Chief Justice Gants possessed many talents and qualities, but if I had to choose one to highlight, it would be his empathy. He was keenly aware of the many ways in which life can be unfair and the struggles faced by those who suffer injustice. His empathy led him to fight incessantly to make the world a more equitable place. Empathy was the foundation for his efforts to address the bias and disparities in our legal system and to improve access to justice for those who cannot afford counsel. But just as a great portrait requires many brushstrokes to render its subject, so we need many perspectives to capture the character of Chief Justice Gants. And so, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker, the Honorable Maura Healey, Governor of Massachusetts.
Good afternoon. Chief Justice Budd, thank you so much for the invitation, for welcoming all of us here today. Chief Justice Ireland, Chief Justice Marshall. It's so wonderful, incredible to see so many of our justices and judges who've served on the Supreme Judicial Court, the Massachusetts Appeals Court, our superior courts and other courts, and those, of course, currently serving. We thank you for your service and work as well. To all of the many court personnel who have worked and continue to work in courts throughout the Commonwealth, we are grateful for the work that you do. To the special court family of Chief Justice Gants, his clerks, those who worked with him in chambers. We see colleagues from the U.S. Attorney's Office and private practice here as well. Governor Weld, speaking of the U.S. Attorney's Office, wonderful to see you. Senator Barrett, Senator Brownsberger, others from the legislature, all of whom had deep regard for the work of Chief Justice Gants. And most of all, to Debbie, Professor Ramirez, as I'll always refer to you, PTSD from having narrowly escaped criminal procedure, where Michael and Rachel, though at 1 and 4 years old, were always the examples in our criminal procedure lessons. It's wonderful to see you, Michael and Rachel. I know you're watching. Fred, Chief Justice Gants's brother, and all members of Justice Gants's family. It's a privilege to be here to honor a great jurist and an even greater human being. What made Justice Gants so special is that those two roles, the judge and the person, were never separate. His decency and kindness and empathy shone through everything that he did, not least in how he approached the law. It was a shock to all of us when we learned of his sudden passing. But the outpouring of love, of respect, appreciation that followed was a sign not only of the esteem in which he was held by so many, but also of what his legacy would be. He left a legal and judicial community full of people who today strive to emulate his values and want deeply to continue his work. Appropriately, the Chief Justice Gants Judicial Scholarship Program has been established in his memory. It will give law students a chance to get experience with the courts so that our Commonwealth can broaden access to careers in the law and in public service, just as he did. I first met Judge Gants, then Judge Gants, when I was a litigation associate at Healey. And there was a certain case that was of such importance, it was destined for the business litigation session at the time, then presided over by Judge Gants. And it was the case that was to determine whether or not Doug Mankiewicz lawfully pocketed that baseball, the last out of the World Series game, on the field in St. Louis. Now, Chief Justice Gants has said that if he couldn't have played for the Red Sox, being Chief Justice ultimately was a good second solid choice. So it was that background that he actually heard the case. And all of us, together with the help of Harold Coe, dove in and learned all that we needed to learn about who actually owns baseball bats and mitts and even the stockings, and the rules are different depending on whose field it is, and the rules are even more different when it's MLB playoffs. And the person who decided that case and restored that baseball to Red Sox Nation was none other than Judge Gants. He does not get enough credit for that one case. In all seriousness, though, I had further opportunities to work with then Chief Justice Gants when I became Attorney General. And I remember the first time I met with him in his office. And I remember how struck I was by his deep and demonstrated conviction around the need to ensure access to justice in this state. The need for resources, the need for judges, the need for well-resourced courts, the need for well-trained advocates, and the need for partnership across our legal and judicial system. And while we talked of serious subjects and serious needs out there, because his focus was always on the most vulnerable among us, he always spoke with that glimmer in his eye and a smile on his face when he spoke with urgency and intentionality about things that needed to be done. I so often recall leaving my office at Saltonstall and seeing so often it was Justice Gants dragging that wheelie laden with briefs and all this stuff down the hill, or sometimes in the morning up the hill to his chambers. I don't think there was a person who's worked harder as a judge in our courts. Chief Justice Gants broke new ground as the first Jewish Chief Justice, someone conscious of the injustices of history and the courage and commitment it takes to make change. Throughout his judicial career, he advocated for the powerless, those whose voices are not often heard or always heard, not just in the halls of justice, but in the halls of power. And he did so in ways that accomplished real change. He spoke out loud the fact that the legal system as it exists does not always treat people equally, as hard as the courts may try. that people present before the legal system with so many issues and problems, so many the result of systemic injustice, racism, and the like. But Chief Justice Gants believed that together we could make the system more fair by getting real, tangible things done. And that's what he set about doing. With his focus on the practical, he championed the establishment of court service centers to assist self-represented litigants. He co-chaired the Access to Justice Commission. He asked Harvard Law School to conduct a study on racial disparities in sentencing, and then to provide that data and the impetus needed for change. And in so many decisions he wrote, both on the SJC and the Superior Court, he always had the public interest in mind. I remember the landmark decision he wrote, helping to make sure that people facing the threat of eviction could access our courts. Because Chief Justice Gants understood the uphill battles that unrepresented tenants faced in fast-moving eviction proceedings. He decided cases, seminal cases, that established things like the ability to pay, that looked at making sure that consumers and homeowners were protected from the predatory tactics of lenders and debt collectors. On the bench, he was always an advocate, appropriately as a judge, but nevertheless an advocate cognizant of, mindful of, those who faced inflated bills for health care or people with disabilities who needed accommodations. He wrote countless opinions to protect access to our fundamental constitutional rights, particularly mindful of the historic injustices faced by so many criminal defendants. He made sure that no one can deny the truth. These are not only historic injustices, but ongoing inequities that together we must look to redress. The truth continues to guide the work of criminal justice reform across the judicial, legislative, and executive branches of government in our state. Now, I referenced Chief Justice Gants and his love of the Red Sox and his fondness for referencing them in his daily work. If Chief Justice Gants's accomplishments were home runs, he would be a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. In so many ways, Chief Justice Gants made the law and our courts more humane and more just. And as we know, as Massachusetts goes, so eventually goes the rest of the country, starting back with that John Adams fellow. So his work will continue to make our state, our country, and our world a better place for years to come. As his son Michael said after his passing, Ralph Gants did every single thing he could to make our justice system more kind, more generous, more fair, and he succeeded. We honor that legacy with this beautiful portrait. Let us also be inspired to honor him with our actions in all the ways we can use our various roles to make our world more equitable and more just, and fundamentally doing so with empathy to make people's lives better. We're grateful forever to you, Chief Justice Gants, for your commitment and your sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Healey. We'll now hear from the Honorable Roderick Ireland, who served on the Supreme Judicial Court from 1997 to 2014 and preceded Chief Justice Gants as the court's 36th Chief Justice. Chief Ireland.
Thank you. Chief Justice Budd, esteemed justices of the SJC, Governor Healey, members of the legislature and the judiciary, Attorney Roger Michael, artist Charmy Altshuler, friends and family of Chief Justice Gants, and most importantly, his wife Deborah, his daughter Rachel, and his son Michael. It is an honor to have been asked by Deborah to deliver remarks on the occasion of the unveiling of the portrait of her late husband and our former Chief Justice Ralph D. Gants, as we gather here to celebrate his many years of service to the Commonwealth. Now, we all know how brilliant Ralph was, what a thoughtful man he was, but not everyone knows about how decent, considerate, and kind he was to his colleagues behind closed doors. And I thought I would share my experiences with Ralph that showed that Ralph was a mensch. For those of you who don't know, mensch is a Yiddish word which roughly means good person. And Ralph certainly was a good person, and he was good to me. Let me explain. Back when Ralph first came on this bench as an associate justice, I was the senior justice, having been there the longest, outranked only by then Chief Justice Margaret Marshall. Now, the court followed a number of traditions that have evolved over the years. And these traditions established the tenor of the interactions among the justices as they engaged with each other to do their work. And the court prided itself on being an extremely collaborative institution. Its goal was always to produce the very best thinking and the very best final work product, and I'm pleased to say that that tradition has continued to this very day. Collaboration was especially important when we held our monthly meetings to discuss and critique each other's drafts. We called those meetings consultation, and the tradition was that cases were discussed and voted on by seniority, with the most senior justice speaking first, and then working down to the junior justice. And then the Chief Justice had the final word, the last word. Now, I'm probably telling stories out of school when I talk about consultation, but I want you to know that sometimes consultations could be very difficult. Now, I spoke first as the senior judge, and then Ralph, as the rookie, spoke last. By tradition, he also sat closest to the door of the consultation room, which meant that he had to get up to answer whenever there was a knock on the door. And as I recall, he always did so in good cheer. Consultation could be daunting. It could be humbling. And that is where Ralph was especially good. He would sometimes disagree with a draft, but at the same time, he would propose language that could cure a problem and make it 100 times better. At the consultations, he would often have suggestions for improving every other judge's drafts to make them tighter and smoother. And he always did it in such a way that you knew that his only goal was to get it right. Now, sometimes, so as not to embarrass a colleague, he would say, I want to speak with my dear colleague outside, and we'll get a draft back to you shortly. Or sometimes he would redraft a section of an opinion and give it to a colleague before consultation for his or her consideration. Now, I was the beneficiary of his kindness on many occasions, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated his consideration and helpfulness. My point here is that Ralph was always careful not to embarrass another colleague. And often he would make a joke about himself to lighten the process. I always thought that he was extremely kind and perceptive during our consultations. And the other justices saw that too and appreciated it. Ralph didn't need to disparage others to elevate himself. He had a tremendous work ethic and was committed to doing a good job. He was a dignified, respectful colleague with a reputation for fairness, integrity, and adherence to the rule of law. As others have said before, he was brilliant, self-effacing, a hard worker, and a very supportive colleague who made all of us better. On a personal note, during my tenure as Chief Justice, Ralph was always very supportive and cooperative whenever I asked for assistance on any matter. And that continued for me after I left the SJC, because he always extended the same courtesy of support to me when I landed at Northeastern University. He facilitated court visits for my students and accepted invitations to participate in events on campus. Of course, and as many people have observed, Ralph's jurisprudential accomplishments were monumental. He was concerned with fairness in criminal cases, and he led the court in important watershed cases that dealt with a number of critically important topics. For example, in 2014 and 2015, Ralph led the charge on eyewitness identification issues. He was concerned that one of the primary reasons that people were wrongly convicted was due to improper eyewitness identification evidence. Ralph changed the jurisprudence and the court's jury instructions to advise the juries to be skeptical of eyewitness identifications because brain science indicated that a human mind was not a tape or video recorder which could record an event and play it back accurately. Instead, we learned that our brain tries to make sense of what it perceives by filling in details and gaps. That process can taint our memories so that eyewitness identification also can be tainted with gap filling and details that, in fact, we did not see. In 2016, Ralph commissioned the blockbuster Harvard study on racial disparities in the Massachusetts criminal justice system that was released in 2020. Ralph wanted to figure out the source of these racial disparities in our system, such as why 80% of those charged with mandatory minimum sentences were persons of color. Were such differences explained by dissimilarities in their prior criminal history or by other concrete indicators that would justify such results? Ralph wanted to know. It took 3 years for that study to be completed, but in the end, it found that the racial disparities in our criminal justice system were not explained by such neutral differences. Instead, the report concluded that the race and ethnicity of criminal defendants directly influence the type and severity of the initial charges brought against them, and that this factor accounted for over 70% of the disparities in sentencing. The study's findings were that people of color were charged more seriously for the same criminal conduct committed by their white peers, and that African Americans were jailed almost 8 times as often as whites, and Latinx 5 times as often. Thanks to Ralph, the study confirmed what many of us had suspected for decades, but now it was out for all the world to see. As Cornel West said, race does matter. In 2017, Ralph also led the court in establishing new rules for bail in criminal cases, in a case called Brangen versus Commonwealth. He held that bail should reflect the defendant's resources and ability to pay. In 2018, Ralph led the court in abolishing the felony murder rule, a controversial doctrine which held that a person could be found guilty of felony murder when he or she committed a felony that caused another person's death, regardless of whether that result was intended. In other words, a person could be deemed culpable of first-degree murder even if he or she lacked the mental state required for murder. Ralph wrote an opinion in a case called Commonwealth versus Brown. It was a concurring opinion joined by 3 other judges here, and in it, he held that going forward, no one could be found guilty of murder in the first degree unless prosecutors proved the defendant had the requisite actual malice regarding the murder itself. In other words, there must be an intent to kill or to cause grievous bodily harm. This was a major shift in policy and a giant step for criminal justice reform. So Ralph Gants accomplished an awful lot in the short time that he was Chief Justice here. There's no question he was a jurisprudential giant, but his qualities as a human being were equally impressive. Ralph was both a gentleman and a gentleman. He was a genuine, sincere man of the people. He was kind, decent, generous, and compassionate. He was the best and the brightest, fearless. He led by example. He was a visionary and an advocate for justice. Ralph Gants combined public service and a professional accomplishment at the highest level in ways that have been of great importance to the state of Massachusetts and the world at large. Not only was he a student of the law, but also of humanity. And one of his virtues was that he never took himself too seriously. He always understood that his work was important, not himself. He was a class act if ever there was one. To paraphrase Rudyard Kipling, he had the quality to talk with crowds and keep your virtue, walk with kings and not lose the common touch. Ralph truly was a giant, an icon, and on top of everything else, Ralph Gants was a good guy. It was my pleasure to know him. In closing, Ralph always acknowledged me publicly as Chief Justice, and I did the same to him. And so, chief to chief, I want to acknowledge Chief Justice Ralph Gants as a visionary and outstanding jurist, and one whose legacy will be remembered for generations. In the words of the scripture, Timothy 2, chapter 4, verse 7, he fought the good fight, he finished the race, and he kept the faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Ireland. Our next speaker, Roger Michael, is the founder and executive director of the Institute for Digital Archaeology. He's led an extraordinarily varied career as a lawyer and scholar. But for today, we're particularly grateful to him for making the portrait of Chief Justice Gants possible and enlisting the talented artist who painted it, Charmy Altschuler, who's here today with members of her family. Roger.
Governor, Chief Justices, and Justices of America's oldest appellate tribunal. Other distinguished judges present, honorable members of the bar, court staff, family, and guests, it is a signal honor to be asked to speak today, an honor for which I thank Chief Justice Budd and my dear friend, Professor Deborah Ramirez. One of Muhammad Ali's most memorable poems begins, "I wrestled with alligators and tussled with whales." After 25 years, off and on, as an appellate prosecutor and too many trips to this courtroom to remember, both here and in the high-rise next door, I know exactly whereof the champ spoke. Without question, I face my share of skillful interlocutors, Graney, Liakos, Abrams, Wilkins, Marshall, you're here today, and Link, to name just a few. And while all were superb, there was none that I enjoyed crossing lances with more than our honorand today, Chief Justice Ralph Gants. Our last encounter was notable. On the cusp of my retirement and eager to clear my backlog, Fran Keneally gave me a most thoughtful parting gift, 2 arguments on the same day. The chief fired his first question in the first case before I could reach the lectern behind me to unpack my notes, and we were off. Over the course of the next hour, the chief and I somehow managed to verge on to Zwingli and Melville, Luther and Brandeis, all moments which, through the terrifying magic of YouTube, I can now relive at my leisure. At a crucial juncture, I pointed out to the chief that Blackstone's views on double jeopardy had become unmoored from modern precedents and survived today only on the strength of mere tradition. The chief mused for a moment, then flashed that trademark grin and replied, "Without traditions, Mr. Michael, our lives would be as shaky as a fiddler on the roof." I swear to God. It was a perfect reply that evinced so many of the qualities and values that the chief embodied. The sheer elegance of conceding a dispositive point through good-natured irony, a respectful tip of the hat to a family heritage that was central to his identity, and a poetic reminder of the larger traditions that dictate both the contours of the arc of the law and bind together the small community in whose care it has been consigned. With that happy moment in mind, I return to the court today after a 7-year absence and will be so very pleased to see the chief still front and center, perfect and immortal in this lovely portrait by Charmin Altshuler. Mrs. Altshuler and I have worked together on many portraits. Governor Patrick, Senator Cowan, and Chief Justice Ireland are a few of the more familiar names. All are images of friends I have known for decades. My fellow Oxonian Samuel Johnson once observed, "I would rather see the portrait of a cat that I know well than all of the allegorical paintings in the world." Those of us here today, lucky enough to have known the chief, can fully appreciate that sentiment. When a portrait captures the essence of a sitter, a glint in the eyes, the gesture of a hand, or the curve of a smile, it provides a unique occasion for a very personal communion with the subject. Thanks to Mrs. Altshuler's skill, over the decades to come, thousands of people entering this room who knew him will have one more opportunity to spend a private moment with the chief. Beyond that, and just as important, this painting offers up Chief Justice Gants as an example of who we are and what we value to generations of lawyers who will never know us. It was said of the legacy embodied by Lemuel Shaw's remarkable portrait, a painting in which, as a few of us here today may recall, the chief took a very special interest. The judgment of time is not often wrong, and a figure whose name and image endures through the ages must be made of more than common clay. It is good for the law to have representatives among these immortals. We must never forget that though ours is a government of laws and not of men, it is one that must be administered by human beings, and that the vigor of the system depends upon the moral strength, humility, and integrity with which it is administered, while respect for law depends upon the soundness of its principles. Confidence in the law can be sustained only through the medium of upright judges and lawyers. I would suggest that we could not have chosen a better emissary to the future, a more apt representative of the collective present in which so many here today have participated than Chief Justice Ralph Gants. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I'm now going to ask the Honorable Frank Gaziano, a colleague of Chief Justice Gants when they were both on the Superior Court and then again here on the SJC, to accept the portrait on behalf of the court.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, is that it? 1, 2, 3.
On behalf of the justices of the Supreme Judicial Court, we are grateful for the portrait of our beloved former Chief Justice, Ralph Gants. It captures, to the artist, both that sparkle in his eyes and that signature wry, mischievous Ralph Gants smile. Before this event, I was going over the procedure with our executive director, Tim McGuire, and I said, Tim, is this going to be in the Thorndike Library? And he said, yes, it is. I said, well, where? And Tim said, well, you walk in, headed towards the courtroom, and it'll be up on the wall on the far left. And I said, that's a perfect place for Ralph. Now, filing past Ralph's portrait on the way to the courtroom, we all will be reminded of our collective duty to apply the law fairly, without fear or favor, and to always look out for the little guy.
Thank you, Justice Gaziano. Finally, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Professor Deborah Ramirez of the Northeastern University School of Law, Chief Justice Gantz's wife and partner in their joint quest for justice.
Honored guests, the unveiling of this portrait pays tribute to my late husband, Chief Justice Ralph D. Gants. And there are so many people I have to thank for making this moment possible. As many of you know, Ralph spent 23 years in the courthouses of Massachusetts. And that is why my children and I wanted to have a portrait of him here in this courthouse. It took us 4 long years, and we had lots of help to be able to celebrate today his legacy. First, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Roger Michelle. There would be no portrait without you, Roger. And you funded this project and shepherded it to completion. Really, your sheer determination, fortitude, and unwavering support helped us to come to this moment. Un mil de gracias. A special acknowledgement is also due to the talented and patient artist, Charmy Outschuler. Charmy managed to capture Ralph's essence, even though she never met him and he never posed for a portrait for her. We had to work with photographs, and she was patient and kind as we went through many iterations. Thank you. I want to thank you, Chief Justice Budd, because nothing could happen without you, and your leadership and contributions have made this event a reality, and I'm so grateful to you. Thank you. And of course, I want to thank you, Governor Maura Healey, my former student, just so you remember, for sharing your remarks and your thoughts and your remembrances of Ralph. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your being here. And to Chief Justice Rick Ireland, thank you for sharing with us your recollections of working with Ralph. I'd also like to express my gratitude to Chris Burek. She, along with Tim McGuire and Blanca Tosada, where's Blanca? Worked tirelessly, strategizing and planning about how to bring us all together in this courtroom today. So thank you. During the last 4 years, I have lost my husband, my mom, my dad, and my little dog Tig. In this season of loss, so many of you have stood beside me, and I want to thank all of you, my sisters of choice, my friends, my family, and those who have stood by me during the last 4 years. and of course to my children, Michael and Rachel. Your father and I are so proud of you. You are our most important legacy. Thank you for being by my side, always. Ralph's spirit left his body on September 14th, 2020, almost 4 years ago. Though his physical presence is no longer with us, his spirit remains here in this courthouse. He resides in the memories of you and in the important work that you do every day. So today is a celebration, not a sad day. We're celebrating his legacy, and he lived by 2 principles. The first I call radical optimism. This is the belief that there's always a way to solve a problem, no matter how big or how complex. And he was also guided by the Jewish concept of Tikkun Olam, the idea that the world is a broken place and that all of us have an obligation to repair it. He was not a perfect man. Like all of us, he had feet of clay. But he always knew where he wanted to go. He was headed for the promised land, where those entering this courthouse would find justice and the resources to pull their lives together. He had an inner compass, and it pointed toward true north. And though he sometimes got lost in the swamps, chasms, and deserts along the way, like all of us, his journey had one purpose, one destination, justice, and he was determined to get there. He had no illusions about the challenges of our justice system, but Ralph was not daunted by the enormity of these challenges. He tried to do justice every day. He walked humbly. He knew he was never going to be able to complete the work, but he also knew that he was never free to abandon it. So he walked into this courthouse every day with his unrelenting optimism and the notion that with all of you by his side, together, you might be able to help the folks entering the courthouse solve the underlying problems that led them to this space. Throughout his career, he knew and understood that the individuals who came before him were often at the lowest points in their lives. All other systems had failed them. Some came charged with serious crimes. Others were survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault. Some were struggling with mental health issues and or substance use disorder issues or trauma. He hoped that all of them would be pleasantly surprised to find clerk magistrates, probation officers, housing specialists, community justice support folks, and judges who would be there to help them find the resources they would need to get back on their feet and regain and renew their lives. So I hope that when you gaze upon this portrait, you will remember his vision of a courthouse of problem solvers, repairing the world one case at a time. My children and I have chosen to honor Ralph's legacy by continuing his work. We didn't want his name on a park, a street, or a building. Instead, with the help of the Mass Bar Foundation, we created the Chief Justice Ralph D. Gants Fund for Racial Equity and Access to Justice. Many of you present have contributed generously to that fund, and I am deeply grateful to you for that. Through this fund, and with the help of Northeastern University School of Law's Criminal Justice Task Force and the Center for Law, Equity, and Race, we initiated the following projects to ensure the court would have the tools and infrastructure needed to engage in the kind of problem solving he envisioned. Now, a lot of this work began when Ralph was alive. He worked with Senator Will Brownsberger, Probation Commissioner Ed Dolan, the Executive Director of the Office of Community Corrections, Vince Laurenti, and asked the legislature to repurpose underutilized resources at the OCC. Why? To create a comprehensive, statewide, state-funded reentry network that would help every person coming out of prison or jail find the resources that they would need to lead productive lives. In 2018, while he was still alive, the legislature passed legislation to create that reentry network. And when that happened, Ralph exclaimed to me, "This is a big deal," because he talked like that. And what he meant was that a revitalized OCC could provide the courts with the institutional support and resources that they would need to be effective problem solvers. Now, he supported this model for 3 reasons. 1, he believed that reentry should begin the moment a defendant walks into the courthouse, that through pretrial diversion, resources and programming could provide an alternative to jail pending trial. 2, he believed that everyone in the courthouse should be a problem solver, focused on identifying and addressing the underlying problems that brought the person to the court in the first place. And 3, he believed that if judges were to be effective problem solvers, they would need the resources to do so. And that is why he was jubilant that the legislature trusted the court to use these resources to help people get back on their feet. But as many of you know, that is now in jeopardy. When I met with Senator Will Brownsberger recently, and he has been one of our biggest supporters, he said that the usage numbers and the number of clients being served at the community justice support centers do not justify the legislative expenditure. So the courts now need to embrace and use the centers more fully, or we will not get the legislative funding for them next year. Essentially, we have to use these centers and their resources or lose them. We have the funding for this year, $32 million, but we need to fully use the centers and services if we want to keep that funding. Now, if Ralph were alive today, he would be giving this response, not me. But he always, and you know this, he always used moments like this to ask all of you for help. Yes? No? Yes. Before, after, during, always help. And today I know he would say, look, we have to learn more about the resources at the community justice support centers, use them, take a tour of a center, ask probation to do an education center session for you to learn more about how these resources can be used. In short, I need you, all of you, to finish the work that he began. After Ralph died, we sought to continue Ralph's vision for problem-solving courts and reentry reform. We asked the legislature to create a $2 million annual fund, the Ralph Gants Reentry Fund, in order to hire reentry coordinators for each of the 18 community justice support centers. With the help of the legislature and Senator Will Brownsberger, and with assistance from Justice Sidney Hanlon and Judge Roz Miller, and this year from the governor, this fund now provides financial support to all of the 18 sites. To further harness the full strength of this model, we created a resource finder. We knew that the judges would need more than institutional support. They would need resources beyond what the Community Justice Support Center had to solve the underlying problems like homelessness, substance use disorder, or mental illness. So recently, we launched the Massachusetts Reentry Resource Directory. And this is I'm not very tech savvy, but it's an online resource to help justice-involved individuals and marginal communities access the resources they need to lead successful lives. It lists 33 categories of resources and services available to justice-involved people. This was a long project. It was a joint multi-year effort led by the tenacious and amazing attorney Donna Chappello, supported by Al Caneb, Tom Curry of the Gardner Howland Shaw Foundation, the Dismas House, the Criminal Justice Institute, and Suffolk University School of Law. Though it was designed for those who are re-entering, it also can serve many marginalized community members. When Ralph and I were in Israel, we were inspired by their problem-solving courts. We witnessed judges who asked more than what crime did the defendant commit and what punishment should be allocated. The courts appointed guardian ad litems to discover why the defendant committed the crime and how to address the underlying problems that brought the defendant to the courthouse. Now, what we saw could not be exactly replicated here because of our adversarial system and a defendant's right to counsel. But one way to implement a similar model of judicial problem solving and focusing on the underlying problems is restorative justice. Restorative justice circles are places where all members of the community sit in a circle, victims, community members, defendants, judges, prosecutors, defense counsel, to craft solutions that would heal everyone in the circle. This is an alternative way to address the underlying problems that brought the defendant into the courthouse, and an alternative way to use the Community Justice Support Center resources. To make this goal a reality, we worked with Professor Susan Mays Rothstein of Suffolk Law School's Center for Restorative Justice and the Harry Elam Judicial Conference to train the first cohort of judges in restorative justice practices. As Chief Justice Budd and the court launched their restorative justice pilot project, we hope these judges can contribute to that enterprise. Finally, as the governor noted, after Ralph's death, we asked the legislature to create the Ralph D. Gants Judicial Scholarship Fund. And this was to provide law students across the Commonwealth who could not afford to take unpaid summer internships here in the courthouse or unpaid co-ops with the funds to do so. These Gants fellowships give Massachusetts law students the opportunity to gain valuable experience in the judicial system. It was created in collaboration with the Mass Bar Foundation and is an annual scholarship fund. I am very grateful to them for administering it and grateful to those of you who have volunteered to hire and to mentor the Gants Fellows as part of that program. Our goal in all of this was not merely to honor Ralph's vision for a better judicial system, but also to support all of you in the important and essential work you do every day. I know that what he asked of you and of all of us was and is hard. But part of Ralph's radical optimism was that he always believed we could do hard things and collectively bend the arc of the universe towards justice. As we look at his portrait today, let us remember Ralph as one of the forces that went strong in this courthouse, guiding us, inspiring us, nudging us to do our best to be problem solvers and to forge ahead each day on the path towards justice. Of course, he knew, as all of us do, that justice is a relay race. None of us can hope to finish the race in our lifetime. Nonetheless, he ran his leg of the race as fast and as long as he could with remarkable dedication until his heart gave out. And with his passing, this baton was passed to all of us, to all of you. He believed in you. He believed in us. And he knew you would continue to run the race. And so to Justice Budd and the judges and justices in the courthouses of Massachusetts, I pass this baton to you. Godspeed.
Professor Ramirez, thank you for those heartfelt remarks. I think we'll all take it to heart. This has been a fitting tribute to Chief Justice Gants and the ideals that he championed. But the greatest tribute that we can give him is to continue the work that he began, each in our own way. Thank you all for attending, and for those of us who are here live, we ask you to join us in the conference suite for a reception. Thanks again.